Before the story begins, I'd like to ask you to subscribe and like. This will help the channel grow. The Case of the Paper Shadow, a detective mystery story. Detective Nora Vale was halfway through her first cup of bitter station coffee when dispatch called in a strange report. Missing courier. Unopened package left behind. Possible foul play. She groaned. Missing couriers were usually guys who overslept or ran away with the goods. But when the dispatcher added, "Security footage shows something unusual," Nora grabbed her coat without another sip. Cliffside Courier Services was a small, tidy building downtown. The manager, a nervous man with a twitching mustache, ushered her into the office. "The package was for a private collector," he explained, sweating. "But Paul, our courier, never made it out the door. He walked into the loading bay and just vanished." Nora frowned. "Vanished how? People don't evaporate." He pointed at the monitor. The footage showed Paul entering the loading bay, scanning the label, picking up a small rectangular package, and then a flicker passed across the lens, like a smear of ink. When the picture cleared, Paul was gone. The package lay on the floor. "Camera glitch?" Nora asked. The manager shook his head. "We checked. No interruptions, no bugs, and the bay door never opened." Nora crouched beside the package. It was wrapped in heavy parchment-like paper, sealed with a deep crimson wax stamp displaying a symbol she didn't recognize, something like an I cross with a quill. She lifted it. The air around her shifted, just slightly, as if a breeze passed inside the closed room. "Detective?" the manager asked nervously. Nora steadied herself. "Tell me everything this courier was delivering." He swallowed. "A document. An original manuscript. At least, that's what the client claimed." "And the client is?" He tapped the file. "A man who calls himself Mr. Ink." Nora raised a brow. "That his real name?" "We don't know." She looked again at the parchment package. Whatever Paul had carried, it wasn't ordinary paper. Back at her office, Nora examined the package under proper lighting. The wax seal, though aged, hadn't cracked during the fall. But what caught her attention was the faint scent, dry, dusty, ancient, like old libraries and forgotten attics. She reached for a scalpel. The moment the metal touched the wax, the overhead lights dimmed. Not flickered, dimmed, as if drained. Nora froze. "Okay, that's not ideal." She cut through the seal. Inside was a single sheet of yellowed paper, covered in handwritten text that curled across the page like living vines. The ink shone faintly blue, shifting under the light. She read the first line aloud, asterisk. "Those who carry this script must guard their shadow well, for ink remembers what man forgets." Star. Nora blinked. "What does that even mean?" Suddenly, the light snapped back to full brightness, and her shadow on the floor didn't quite match her movement. Nora slowly raised a hand. Her shadow lifted its arm, a half-second too late. A chill crawled up her spine. "Okay," she whispered. "This is either a severe caffeine hallucination, or Paul stumbled into something way above his pay grade." She called forensic specialist Leo Baptiste. He arrived, grumbling about early morning weirdness, but stopped complaining the second he saw the page. "This isn't standard ink," he murmured. "Looks organic. Like it's still metabolizing oxygen." "That's comforting." Leo lifted a UV lamp. The manuscript glowed, forming new words beneath the visible ones. Nora's eyes widened. Asterisk. "Find me where the ink runs thin." Star. Leo looked at her. "What does that mean?" Before Nora could answer, her office lights flickered again, but this time, her shadow wasn't the only one acting wrong. Leo's shadow turned its head toward the manuscript. Slowly, deliberately, Nora grabbed the page, slammed it back into the package, and sealed the flap with tape. The shadows froze. Leo exhaled shakily. Detective, I think that manuscript wants something. Nora nodded grimly. Then we better find out what before someone else disappears. Nora traced the courier's route from the service center to the package's intended destination. The address led her to an old brick townhouse with black shutters and a red door. A brass plaque read, Mr. Einke, Historical Documents Acquisition. Nora knocked. No answer. She tried the handle. Unlocked. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of old parchment. Shelves lined the walls, each holding scrolls, ledgers, diaries, and sealed envelopes, all meticulously labeled. But something was off. The shadows in the room didn't match their objects. A lamp cast a long vertical shadow, but its real shadow should have been horizontal. A painting cast no shadow at all. At the center of the room stood an oak desk. On it, a single note, written in the same blue ink. Asterisk. Detective Vale, welcome. You are late. Star. Nora stiffened. Late? Another line formed beneath the first, ink drawing itself across the page in real time. Asterisk. The courier made a mistake. He opened the manuscript. Star. Nora glanced at the sealed package in her hand. What happens if someone opens it? The ink began writing again. Asterisk. Ink and shadow are bound. When one reads, one is read. Star. Nora's pulse quickened. What did it read in Paul? A final line unfurled, asterisk. Enough to take him. Star. A floorboard creaked behind her. Nora whirled. A tall figure stood in the doorway, draped in a long coat that shimmered like wet ink, face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Mr. Ink, I presume? Nora asked, hand on her holster. The figure tilted its head. Not as a person would, but like a puppet someone tugged by strings. Its voice was thick, liquid. Detective Vale, you should not have brought the manuscript here. The shadows lengthened around his feet, curling like tendrils. Nora stepped back. Where is the courier? She demanded. Mr. Ink's voice rippled. His shadow is elsewhere now. And then he vanished into a swirl of black ink that crawled across the floorboards like living oil. Nora stood alone. Except she wasn't. Her own shadow stretched toward the spot where he disappeared, reaching, wanting, obeying something she didn't understand. Nora returned to the station and locked herself in the briefing room, manuscript spread out before her. Leo arrived minutes later, armed with microscopes, reagents, and one extremely jittery expression. I've analyzed the fibers, Leo said. This paper predates modern papermaking by centuries. And the ink. Nora, it contains microscopic structures that behave like... He hesitated. Cells. Cells? Nora repeated. Ink doesn't have cells. This one does. Before they could discuss further, the manuscript pulsed, literally pulsed, as if reacting to their voices. Then new words unfurled across the margin. Asterisk. Bring me home. Star. Where? Nora asked aloud. The ink wrote, asterisk. To the place of thin shadows. Star. More riddles. She spread out city maps, historical blueprints, topography files. But Leo noticed something first. Nora, look at the edge of the page. She did. The paper's fibers were unraveling, stretching into long, thin strands that pointed toward the window like compass needles. The manuscript wasn't just telling her. It was showing her. It's leading us, Nora whispered. Somewhere close. They followed the paper's direction through the city until it guided them to an alley behind the abandoned Hartwell printing factory, shut down for decades. The air here felt heavier, dimmer, as if sunlight was weaker. Nora pushed open the metal door. Inside was a maze of rusted machines, paper scraps, old barrels of dried ink, and shadows that move without owners. Leo clutched her arm. Nora, this place. The shadows are wrong. They were. Some stretched across the floor like puddles. Others curled around machinery like vines. One shadow hung on the wall like a portrait, but the person it belonged to was nowhere in sight. Nora, Leo whispered, I think this is where Paul is. And then they heard him. A faint voice, calling from inside the shadows themselves. Help! Help me! Nora stepped toward the sound, and the shadows surged forward, as if eager to welcome her inside. The shadows collapsed inward like a funnel, pulling Nora off balance. Leo grabbed her arm, but a tendril of darkness wrapped around his wrist. He screamed, shaking it off before it could drag him. Nora took a breath. Stay behind me. If these things want the manuscript, they'll follow me. She held the page high. The shadows quivered, drawn to it. Come on, she said. Take me to Paul. A path opened through the darkness, leading deeper into the printing factory. Nora and Leo followed, step by careful step. The trail ended in the old ink drying room, a huge circular chamber lined with empty vats. But in the center stood a tall cylindrical machine, still intact, still humming faintly though it had no power source. A human silhouette was trapped inside. Paul! Nora rushed forward. His body was intact, but his shadow was not. The shadow flickered on the wall beside him, stretching, shrinking, twisting independently, like a creature trying to shed its skin. Leo swallowed. Nora, he's alive, but his shadow is not connected to him anymore. The manuscript pulsed violently, and Mr. Ink emerged from the darkness behind them. His voice echoed from every direction. Detective Vale, you brought it home. Nora faced him. Release the courier. I cannot. His shadow has been consumed. By you? Mr. Ink tilted his head. By itself. The shadows surrounding him rose like a tide. Leo whispered. What is he? Nora didn't blink. A collector. Mr. Ink lifted a hand. The manuscript tore itself from Nora's grip, floating toward him. She lunged, but the shadows surged, holding her back. Ink remembers, Mr. Ink whispered. Shadows obey. Paper stores what the world forgets. The manuscript unfolded midair into dozens of fluttering pages that hadn't existed a moment before, swirling around him like birds. The air thickened with darkness. Leo shouted, Nora! The press! The old printing press beside them rattled as if awakening. Nora realized what he meant. Paper. Ink. Shadows. This room wasn't just where Mr. Ink drew his power. It was where he could be trapped. Leo! Help me push. Together they dragged the manuscript's glowing page into the press. Mr. Ink roared, a sound like shredding paper and exploding ink cartridges. The shadows attacked, but Leo slammed the press shut. Nora pulled the lever. The machine stamped down. A shockwave burst through the factory, sucking all shadows inward like a black hole. Mr. Ink screamed cut off instantly, and silence fell. When Nora opened the press, the manuscript lay flat, inert, normal, and Paul's shadow slowly crawled back into place beneath him. Paul was disoriented but alive. Paramedics took him away, and Leo collapsed onto a crate sweating. You ever want to see paper again? Leo muttered. Not for a month, Nora said. They left the factory just as dawn broke, bathing the world in warm light, real light. The shadows stretched normally again. But back at the station, as Nora filled out her incident report, she noticed something. Her own shadow was slightly darker than usual, sharper, more defined, and as she lifted her coffee mug, her shadow lifted its mug a fraction sooner. Nora froze. On her desk lay the manuscript, sealed in an evidence bag. A single line of ink appeared inside it. Asterisk. The story isn't finished. Star. Nora exhaled slowly. Of course it isn't. And her shadow smiled before she did.